While we prefer to attribute the notoriety of our alumni to the educations and experiences received at this institution, the truth about Leslie Hinchcliffe Edwards is that she was rubbing shoulders with greatness long before her arrival here. Born and raised in California, Leslie spent most of her early life singing and performing in LA theaters with people such as Liza Minnelli, Ricardo Montalban, and her heartthrob Ricky Nelson. She was a background singer for Andy Williams and Glenn Campbell. At BYU, she studied social work and history and was determined to complete her education without an encumbering husband. She succeeded, but she still claimed she had no plans for the big picture and simply went straight to Boston with new luggage and $25 where she worked for Fidelity. Richard Bushman was her bishop and L. Tom Perry was her stake president. She credits the welcoming inclusion of Claudia Bushman for helping her open her eyes to the fact that she had more to offer than she knew. After a few more stops, including working for Henry Kissinger in Washington, D.C., she eventually returned to Utah, where she met her husband, Jack Edwards. They have 3 children, Josh, Kristen, and Susan. Leslie continued her adventures with her family, including 22 years in Saudi Arabia, where she worked with NBC News, and then continued to do so when they all returned to Salt Lake City. She organized the news bureaus for the Winter 2002 Olympics and remained to manage the coverage of the kidnapping and recovery of Elizabeth Smart. Leslie retired to become a teacher and work with third-grade gifted and talented programs in Salt Lake City. After arranging visits with astronauts and writing grants for her school to improve geographical and international learning, she was a shoo-in to receive the prestigious Golden Apple Teaching Award in 2013. We're pleased to honor Sister Edwards today and are grateful for her time to visit our classroom.
Gee, thank you. I was pretty excited to hear that myself. So, you live a life and you kind of forget. And I especially appreciate the opening prayer this morning. Thank you so much. There's so much power in prayer. I've recently read a couple of articles from the Harvard Business Review from the May 2014 and the September 2019 magazines, and one was entitled From Purpose to Impact, and the other was Put Purpose at the Core of Your Strategy. And the authors discovered 2 things: that purpose is the key to exceptional leadership and the pathway to greater well-being, and that a sense of corporate purpose has become an essential part of the corporate mission statement rather than a peripheral part as in the past. So I'm going to just kind of digress here for a minute and for the first time ever use PowerPoint. I've done a lot of things in my life, but this isn't one of them. So when my daughter Susan, wait a minute. Right? Okay, thank you. When my daughter Susan joined the United States Air Force, she scored very high on the ASVAB, which is the military's aptitude test. Susan was fluent in Arabic, she was quite competent in French, and she'd studied Spanish all through junior high. And her plan was to become a cryptolinguist. So she was pretty thrilled to be assigned to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. And the Defense Language Institute, for those of you who may not know, it's just simply called DLI, and it's quite well known by the very many CIA, Department of Defense, FBI service members and civilians who've gone through foreign language training there. And it's renowned for being one of the most prestigious and rigorous language schools in the world. Well, having been assured by her chain of command that she would undoubtedly be assigned Arabic, which has always been the language of Susan's heart, she was quite dismayed, disappointed, and angry that her assigned language was to be Urdu. Now, this was when Osama bin Laden was still wreaking havoc on the world, the free world specifically, and hiding out in Abbottabad, Pakistan. So when she called me to communicate her disappointment and frustration, I counseled, tongue-in-cheek, and there's my beautiful daughter, Susan, you don't know why this has happened, but you do have an important mission of service, and I am confident that one day the literate world will open up the New York Times to a banner headline that says, "Blonde American babe responsible for capture of bin Laden." Well, about a year later, Susan was still an Urdu student at DLI, and bin Laden was actually taken down by a SEAL team and a woman behind the scenes, but it just wasn't my Susan. So I called her to tell her, and after a moment of silence, she, with not just a little sarcasm, responded, "Well, what's my mission now, Mom?" So I want to assure you that Susan has gone on to have a distinguished career and decorated career in the Air Force, and I seriously doubt that she ever really believed that her mission was to take down bin Laden. But I also realized in that moment that she hadn't found her sense of purpose, and the Air Force had failed to inspire one in her. So what is our purpose, our mission as students, professors, and graduates of the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences? What is our purpose, and why is that important to know? Our mission statement, your leadership purpose, is who you are and what makes you distinctive, whether you're a college dean, a student, a call center rep, or a software developer. Your purpose is your brand. It's what you're driven to achieve. The article defined it as the magic that makes you tick. It's not what we know, it's how we do it. And it should be very specific and personal and resonating with you and you alone. It's who you can't help being. And it may not be all that flattering. My kids would probably say that mine is probably something like, be the thorn in someone else's side that keeps them moving. So our college mission statement reads, through exacting research and dedicated teaching that integrate the values and doctrines of the restored gospel, we hope to provide an education that helps students become informed citizens and thoughtful leaders who make the communities and families in which we live more just, equitable, and happy. So looking at this as a model for a personal, purpose-driven mission statement, let me first focus on 3 words or word groups in this mission statement: informed, values, and thoughtful leaders. So I like the quote, to provide an education that helps students become informed citizens. So informed, this is a great word. Students, let me just tell you that as a former journalist and a very judicious American citizen, I can tell you now that if you don't operate on a foundation of facts, no one, at least anyone with a brain, is going to take you seriously. Every time you open your mouth, you will be your own worst enemy. My favorite quote of all time is from the late representative from Illinois, Henry Hyde, who said, "Ignorance is salvageable, stupidity is forever." Let that sink in. Ignorance is salvageable, stupidity is forever. How long is forever? It's a pretty long time for you to be stupid. So if you don't know something, it's okay. Be teachable. You can still learn. But if you know and you don't use your knowledge wisely, well, stupidity is forever. And I will say that we can't always be as well informed as we would like. And then it's a good idea to rely on faith and prayer. And I know I can say that because this is Brigham Young University, and we get it. The first few days of August in 1990, when we were living in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard invaded Kuwait, our neighbor 200 miles or about 3 driving hours to the north. It was a little too close for comfort. I was a television and news radio journalist, but also a mother with 3 young children living in a potential war zone. At that exact time, I was packing and preparing to fly myself and my 3 young children here to Brigham Young University to rehearse with the Program Bureau and the Young Ambassadors for a reunion show that we were going to perform for Education Week. Saddam was amassing his troops along the Saudi-Kuwait border. And I could watch all day as giant C-140s would fly in and fly out of the airbase right next door, disgorging U.S. troops and all kinds of equipment. And I had the thought, well, if I leave, what am I going to come back to? Or am I going to return to anything? Or can I return at all? I'm going to be leaving behind my beautiful house filled with all these beautiful things we've collected and on our travels. And what's going to happen to all of my Saudi colleagues and friends whom we had come to love? Well, Jack was eventually able to join my children and I here in Utah. And then we had a decision to make. Do we return to a potential war zone? If so, for how long? My very dear friend Brent Beasley called and offered his vacation home in St. George so that we could have a place to live until things in our little corner of the Middle East could be resolved. Such a tempting offer. And what a relief to know that we had temporary quarters. But still, we simply didn't have enough information to proceed with to make a rational decision. So as a family, we fasted and prayed. We knelt around that bed in our Park City condo, joined in prayer, our hearts earnestly seeking an answer. Our children were in 8th grade, 6th grade, and kindergarten, and we weren't especially keen on placing them in a dangerous environment. Well, something quite remarkable happened. As a family of 5 individuals, we each experienced a warmth washing over us, and we had the clear impression that we were to return to Saudi and that we would be protected and we were to be of service. How to serve in a potential war zone? Well, we didn't know, but we packed and returned to the kingdom, led by faith and a sure answer to prayer. Remember those troops coming out of those C-140s at the Daharan Air Base? Well, there were now over 500,000 of them out in the hot desert protecting the border of the kingdom from the encroaching Iraqi forces, eating a steady diet of MREs. Anybody here know what an MRE is? Pretty nasty, right? No bathing facilities, fighting the sand fleas and the scorpions, and I think worst of all, boredom. We joined with neighbors and friends, and with the support of Aramco and General Schwarzkopf, Storm and Norman, we hosted these young men and women in our homes for an evening each week, giving them an opportunity to shower, do their laundry, have a home-cooked meal, play with the kids. We offered them the opportunity to call home, and back then, believe me, there was no Skype, no FaceTime, no free phone calls. And they were just starved also for reading materials. And so we found that after several months of hosting, we had no popular magazines, no popular books, no church publications. They wanted everything. And one young man told us that he'd been raised LDS but had drifted away from the church and was really grateful for the evening that he had spent with us. And he asked if we had anything church-related that he might be able to take with him to read. Jack asked him if he'd like to have a priesthood blessing. And with tears starting in his eyes, he replied, "Yes, please." Without realizing it, we had found our opportunities to serve. No matter where we are, we have an opportunity to represent our core values in how we present ourselves. During this time, I was the NBC News Bureau coordinator, working with the wonderful Tom Brokaw, the legendary John Chancellor, and also Katie Couric and Willard Scott. Never a dull moment with Willard. And the Scud Stud himself, Arthur Kent. So I just want you to see, this is what a serious journalist Katie Couric is. That's a pancake on her face. And General Schwarzkopf used to come over to our news bureau. He said it was his favorite stop in Saudi, in the war theater. And Tom asked him why, and he said, because I'm always dying to see what t-shirt Leslie is going to wear next. And so that's me with a card that he gave me about my t-shirts and with one of the t-shirts on. And the reason that I included this picture in the upper right-hand corner is because that is Jeff Riggins sitting next to my husband. Jeff was a cameraman, an NBC News cameraman from Germany. And he came up to me one day and he said, "I heard you're a Mormon." And I said, yeah, this was before it was politically incorrect to say that. I said, yes, because I thought maybe he'd start on me or something. And he said, well, I went to Brigham Young University. Now, Jeff was a hard-drinking, smoking guy. He was smoking, but he was smoked a lot. And And I said, oh yeah, really? He says, listen, let me prove it to you. He said, I know the secret password. And do we have secret passwords in the church at BYU? I said, you do? And he says, yeah. He said, family, home, evening. And he says, and I know the theme song. And I said, oh, you do? And he says, yes. Put your shoulders to the wheel, push along. And I said, well, I think you passed, but one more question. What were you doing at the Y? And he said, I was on a baseball scholarship. And I said, oh, and then I asked him if he knew Mike Staferi, who was a friend of mine who played baseball. And he said yes, and we became really great friends. So that's my little News Bureau connection to BYU. And then I just thought you might like to see, this is us down in the basement in the bomb shelter during the Scud attack. That's my friend Ann Shannon, who was one of our video and sound technicians. But next to her is Bob Chestnut, who came in from New York to help with the News Bureau during the war. And we had state-of-the-art chemical uniforms. I don't even know what you call them now, but we definitely would put them on all the time because Saddam Hussein was always saying he was going to launch a horrible chemical war on us, right? So anyway, just some fun pictures to take us back. But journalists are famous. They're infamous, I should say, for their 4-letter word vocabulary. And one day in the News Bureau, I said, hey, listen, y'all, I'm just a sweet little Mormon girl from Salt Lake City, Utah. And if we could tone down the language in here, I'd be real grateful. You could have heard a pin drop. Those tough guy journalists were so respectful for the duration of the War News Bureau that it was just really, really sweet. And the night before the war started, Tom Brokaw, having been tipped off by friends at the Pentagon that the war was going to start that night, came to me and pulled me into a back room and quietly asked me, genuinely concerned, why I had kept my children there during the standoff with Iraq, knowing there was potentially going to be war. And I explained to him, Tom, as a family, we had an answer to prayer, that we would be protected and that we were to be here to be of service. And that led to an opportunity for me to bear my testimony to Tom about faith and about prayer and about answers to prayer and about not questioning the Lord when answers have been given. The officer in charge of the Joint Information Bureau later came down and asked me the same thing, and he was visibly shaking. And we had an identical discussion, and he asked me to pray with him, which I did, and it was a sweet moment. I was finding that you just never think about those opportunities to serve, and sometimes we don't recognize them until we've lived through them. But I won't lie, that night, as I was awakened by the first sirens signaling that the war had begun and warning of an incoming missile attack, I considered leaving the kingdom immediately with my children and heading to Brent's St. George condo as expeditiously as possible. I thought I was insane keeping my kids there, but a voice clearly chastised me. Do not second guess the Lord, Leslie. You prayed for an answer, and you got one. What more do you want? And my heart was calmed. Not calm, but calmed. And I knew we'd be okay. And we were. So, be informed to the best of your ability, especially when faith and prayer are all you have. We live in a tumultuous time. The future is in I'm 73, so mostly your hands. And it behooves us all to be well and accurately informed. Remember, stupidity is forever. Also, use your knowledge wisely and use it for the greater good. The second word from our mission statement on which I will focus is values. Our college mission statement is specific, to the values of the restored gospel. But let's just talk here about values, because it all connects. You know the old cliche, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. What do you stand for? Your mission statement should reflect this. If you don't know, it's not too late to find out, and on your journey of discovery, you're also apt to discover your individual worth, your and perhaps even your divine nature. I'm certain Martin Luther King, an ordinary Catholic priest in the 16th century, thought he knew who he was when he was ordained to the Catholic priesthood in 1507. He not only believed intellectually that his religion was the one true religion, Martin Luther loved his church with all his heart. He was a highly Augustinian monk, a highly educated Augustinian monk. You know, the Augustinians set a very high value on learning and science. And because of that, he had access to many of the ancient documents of the Catholic Church. The more of these documents he read and studied, the more discomfited he became about the sale of indulgences. He discovered that there was no mention of the sale of indulgences, which is essentially paying to have your sins forgiven or to reduce the amount of punishment you would have to undergo for your sins. He discovered that there was no mention of that in Catholic doctrine prior to Pope Urban II, whose papacy began in 1088, which is about 400 years earlier. So, and just a little historical aside here, Pope Urban was waging 3 different wars at that time, the First Crusade among them, and he was running out of money. So this was a good way for him to raise funds for his wars, hence the sale of indulgences. Martin Luther didn't like this, and he was thinking, I can't find anything in the ancient writings where the Savior said anything about the sale of indulgences, and there were some other things that concerned him. So he was seeking answers from his superiors in the church and wasn't getting anywhere. So frustrated, and with great courage, he articulated his concerns into 95 questions, his 95 theses, and nailed those questions to the door of the cathedral in Wittenberg, Germany. And for that, he was taken to the church courts and cautioned to back off with the threat of excommunication. Now, excommunication to Martin Luther is synonymous with spiritual death. He didn't want to destroy the Catholic Church. Remember, he loved his church. He loved his church. He just wanted to get back to what was being taught at the time of Christ. And so he wouldn't back down from his questions. He was excommunicated and he had to go into hiding. And there's a great deal more to this story, but my point is this. On Martin Luther's journey of discovery, indeed, on his journey of faith, he learned a lot more about himself and what he stood for. His mission changed. I'm guessing he didn't formalize a mission statement for himself. But he knew he valued truth, and he knew he valued truth enough to sacrifice his standing in his beloved church. I'm also hypothesizing that most of us won't have as dramatic a road to travel, but we can all hold to that value of truth as Martin Luther did as we travel that road. And perhaps we, like Martin Luther, can do something extraordinary if we know what we stand for. What did he do that was so extraordinary? The year is 1519, and his actions started the Reformation, without which we would not have the Constitution and Bill of Rights. There's a direct path from the Reformation to those 2 documents. Without the Bill of Rights, we wouldn't have the First Amendment. Without the First Amendment, there would be no freedom of religion, and we would likely not have the restored church on the earth. It takes a lot of religious events and a couple of hundred years, but by 1787, we have a constitution. We the people. Talk about a mission statement. Talk about a sense of purpose. It's right there in the preamble. We the people of the United States, that's us. In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. That clearly states our purpose. A really great format to look back on. 4 years later, on 15th of December in 1791, the Bill of Rights is ratified. The First Amendment guarantees us 5 rights, among them the freedom of religion. 29 years later, in 1820, a young boy in Vermont named Joseph Smith kneels in a grove of trees. 1830, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is formally established on the earth in the United States of America because we have religious freedom. From the Reformation to the Restoration. It had to be here. So thank you, Martin Luther and John Knox and John Calvin and James Madison and everybody. Okay, so we're talking values. I love history. I'm sorry I had to digress a little bit. A couple of years ago, my daughter Kristen, who graduated from BYU in 2004, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped Martin Luther, my man. There's my Kristen. She graduated from the Y in 2004 and from the University of Utah in 2006. And she's had a highly respected career with the United States government. She was invited to speak to the seniors at her alma mater, Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia. Kristen is a former CIA officer. She's a former senior policy advisor on terrorism and counterterrorism to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, and also senior policy advisor on terrorism and counterterrorism to the Secretary of Homeland Security. And she did that before she left to become a senior vice president with the Bank of America over their cyber strategy, and she's now traveling the world with her family for a year. She joined the CIA in 2006 with a hope for adventure and a desire to protect the United States. Now, as an operations officer, Kristen initially worked in counterproliferation. So if you're unfamiliar with that, it's preventing the spread of weapons of mass destruction, as well as any of the items and materials that can lead to or aid in their development. Anyway, she was chasing arms dealers, nuclear weapons programs, chemical weapons, and very bad, very shady people, as she called them. And later, she moved into counterterrorism, and her duties included tours in war zones, including near in Afghanistan. Kristen's words to those EHS seniors then are just as relevant to UBYU students now. Keep an eye open for similar unexpected opportunities as you go on with your lives and careers. You've been talked to your entire lives about setting goals, working towards something important, and having a plan. That's part of life. But the other part of life is knowing that the plan is always going to change. Identify what matters most to you in your life. Establish the values you want to live by, and then life's tough, pressure-filled decisions will be easier. The CIA put Kristen through ethics training before sending her to dangerous parts of the world. Why? Well, to help her identify the exact conditions that would lead her to draw her gun and use deadly force. And with that decision made thoughtfully, outside the threat of the moment, she was less likely to freeze or panic when confronted by danger. This is a metaphor for life. Everyone routinely faces smaller yet critical decisions that come packed with pressure. You're going to a social event. What choices are you going to make? Do you want to do drugs or not do drugs? You accidentally come across a pornographic website. Are you going to investigate further? Making those decisions in advance, connecting them with your personal mission statement, your sense of purpose, is critical. And although I recognize I'm speaking to a BYU audience, I also know that we're human and will, even as older adults, continue to face these issues and many others. Values. My chosen third word combination of focus from our mission statement is thoughtful leaders. Our college mission statement proclaims that we want to be not only informed, but also thoughtful leaders who make the communities and families in which we live more just, equitable, and happy. Because our mission statement specifically says thoughtful leaders, let's ask first the question, what's a leader? Leaders lead. Leaders lead. They can lead for the good, as did Nephi, or they can lead for the bad, as did Laman. Which do you choose to be? Let's talk about some good leader traits that you can cultivate. Are you collaborative? Great leaders understand the value of collaboration. They work well with others. They consider a range of perspectives, a wide range of perspectives, and challenge their colleagues respectfully. Even when extenuating circumstances, like social distancing, drive them into isolation, they still regularly brainstorm with their teammates. They know collaboration leads to and yields the best, most innovative ideas. When my son Josh graduated, so by the way, that's Josh on the left, graduated from BYU in 2003, his first job was with Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. And visiting the Microsoft campus with him one day, I noticed recreation areas all over campus, as inside as well as outside. Volleyball, foosball, pool, miniature golf. Gosh, it was just amazing. And I asked Josh about it, and he was explaining that Bill Gates had built those in order to encourage the employees to both recreate and collaborate together. It's harder, I think, to be a my way or the highway type when this sort of social collaboration is available. Their sports teams and collaborative play areas, they're outside the workplace activities such as go-karting and ice hockey. Josh was explaining were effective in team building. And he said that they usually chose to focus on, for their off-campus activities, an activity that nobody was particularly strong at, so that everybody was sort of equally inept. And they all had to work together at becoming skilled. And there was an interdependency that fostered a stronger team organization built on trust that supported a more productive office and a higher retention rate for Microsoft. As Joshie progressed in his career, he has shared many stories of the importance of collaboration in his positions at Microsoft and Amazon, and at the startup that he's now with, which is an artificial intelligence startup. He continues to mentor my third graders each year in leadership and collaboration. Difficult situations call for decisive action. Are you action-oriented? It's great to have big ideas, but can you transform these concepts into concrete solutions? Joseph Smith is widely quoted as having said, "I teach them correct principles and they govern themselves." Allow your teammates autonomy and praise them for their success and their efforts. You know, we live in a pop culture world, and I think, in fact, I'm sure more Americans can name all of the Kardashian sisters than can correctly identify the Vice President of the United States. But there are some celebrities who are action-oriented. Mariska Hargitay is well known for her role as Olivia Benson in, oh my gosh, I just went brain dead. Law and Order, right? Special Victims Unit. And as she was progressing through the show, the script's contents and her preparation for the role really opened her eyes to the systemic problems of sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse. But what really struck her was the fan mail she would receive that prompted her to start her foundation, the Joyful Heart Foundation. The letters didn't say, "I love your show, can you send me an autographed picture?" They said, "I was raped when I was 15. I'm 40 now, and I've never told anyone." Survivors were disclosing their stories to her, many for the first time. Her foundation is now in 3 major cities. It's served over 20,000 people. It's reached over 3 million people via its website and social media. And they have an impressive 10-year strategic plan for how it hopes to achieve its mission. And here's part of its mission statement: to heal, educate, and empower survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse. Mariska is a wife, a mother, an actor, and she's action-oriented. Her foundation has an empowering mission statement that informs us of who they are, their purpose, and what they represent. And undoubtedly, we're all familiar with Sir Elton John and his Elton John AIDS Foundation. He had lost so many close friends to AIDS and HIV. He channeled his efforts to help raise money for all the pioneering organizations in the beginning that had formed, and they were trying to raise funds to fight the disease, and that was a time that was a little bit more challenging to raise those funds. The mission statement of his foundation is to fund frontline partners to prevent infections, fight stigma, and provide treatment with love, compassion, and dignity for the most vulnerable groups affected by HIV around the world. And really he was motivated to start this because of a child that he became very friendly with, an American child, and he just stayed in this young boy's life until This little boy passed away from HIV, which he had received through a blood transfusion. But his foundation now is in more than 60 countries. It's raised over $600 million. And he did more than grieve for his lost friends. He took action to benefit others in our global community. So a good leader is communicative. Communication is key to building trust, ensuring alignment, and boosting community morale during crisis. You and those with whom you collaborate should be able to clearly express your personal, your company, or your group's mission statement and vision as it adjusts to ongoing changes across the business or community landscape. Remember my daughter's advice to her EHS, to the EHS audience she was speaking to. And I think about Martin Luther's ability to change and refocus. Is my phone off or is it ringing? It's off. Okay, I can hear it in my hearing aids, so I'm sorry. So I just don't know if it's off or, okay, oh, thank you. I'm so sorry, everybody. I told everybody this morning, turn your phone off, and okay. So anyway, thinking about Martin Luther's ability to change and refocus as he met challenge after challenge. And it all started with his religious superiors not actively listening until he felt the only way he could communicate his concerns was to nail those questions that he had to the cathedral door. And as I think about you, you are all attending a world-class university. It's not easy to get admitted here. You have to have something special besides good grades. Out of 12,400 applicants last year, 7,300 were accepted. That's about 59%. So I would just want to encourage you, as a leader or future leader, you should have excellent written, verbal, and communication skills. You should feel comfortable speaking in front of larger groups, fielding questions, and addressing concerns. You should be cultivating the skill of active listening and contributing. You need to be resilient. Boy, do we need to be resilient. Think about the donkey that fell into the well and the farmer couldn't get it out, so he had all of his friends coming. They all got shovels and they all started piling dirt on top of the donkey because the farmer said, well, the donkey's old, the well's old, I'll just close it up. Well, the donkey started, every time a shovelful of dirt landed on his back, he shook it off. I feel like we should cue Taylor Swift here. He shook it off, and he took a step up. And he took another step up, and he took another step up until finally he was out of the well. And I just want to say, life is going to shovel a lot of dirt on you. And the trick is to getting out of the well and shake it off and take a step up. And each of those troubles can be a stepping stone. And we can get out of the deepest wells just by not stopping, by not giving up. Now, I just think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor, two heroines of mine who were told after graduating from prestigious law schools, very few women in their law classes, well, I'm sorry, but you can't practice your profession just because of your gender. Or newly elected Prime Minister Winston Churchill in the face of horrendous defeat at Dunkirk. The Germans won the battle, but he bucked his own party, was newly elected, and he ordered all available boats. And you all know the story of Dunkirk, the rescue at Dunkirk. All available boats crossed the English Channel. You had these little skiffs and big yachts, and everybody went over, rescued over 300,000 troops. The battle was lost, but those 300,000 troops lived to fight another day and win the war. So, lead by example. I love Anthony Fauci. Every time I drive by NIH, when I'm with my daughter to go pick up my granddaughter, I just want to yell out the window, Tony Fauci, I'm your #1 fan, you keep it going. And I love everything that he's done for us and the fact that he would never ask his team to do anything that he himself wouldn't do. Be teachable and teach. Great leaders teach. I mean, no, we don't know everything, but that shouldn't stop us from teaching or sharing the knowledge that we do have. And serve. Service is a thoughtful and powerful way to to help make our communities and families in which we live more just, equitable, and happy, no matter our ages. And our dean, Dr. Laura Padilla-Walker, published a study on the effect of teens in communities serving strangers through Just Serve. And it was so enlightening to read that study as to how it lifted, and it continues to lift teenagers. And I encourage you all to read it. It's quite a short article. Muhammad Ali said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." If you're looking for a way to serve your community, a way that will make communities and friends in which you live more just, equitable, and happy, go to justserve.org and find a way to serve. Well, as you know, I'm a teacher, and I see several of my students here this morning. Just want to blow kisses to you all, former students. And I'm kind of famous for my Mrs. Edwards stories. So I'm going to share one with you this morning. Connecting first to the Ubuntu tribe in South Africa, when somebody does something wrong, they take that person to the center of the village. The whole tribe surrounds him. And for 2 days, they will say to the man all the good things that he has done. And the tribe believes that each human being comes into the world as good, only desiring safety, love, peace, and happiness. And yet sometimes, in the pursuit of these things, people can make mistakes. The tribal community sees those mistakes as a cry for help. They unite then to lift him, to connect him with his true nature, to remind him who he really is by speaking all the good that that person has done throughout his lifetime until he fully remembers the truth from which he had been disconnected. I am good. Orange County, California was my home during several of my teenage years. Cheryl Potter was a newlywed who had just graduated cum laude from Brigham Young University's College of Social Sciences. When she and her husband Bob moved to Orange County, Cheryl had been hired there as a probation officer. Bob continued his studies at Long Beach State, played church basketball, and Cheryl was called to be the Laurel teacher. I, in my junior year of high school, was only going to church because I sort of thought it might be true, and because I'd rather be there than at home. Bob and Cheryl mostly, because Bob studied so much, took me under their wings. Cheryl invited me to join her on activities. She took me to lunch. She invited me for dinner and an occasional sleepover after we'd go watch Bob play basketball. I can't tell you the number of Bob's basketball games I attended, but it was fun. And I came to love Bob and Cheryl. I loved them because I knew they loved me unconditionally, even though I was such a mess. They became my tribe. Over the years, Cheryl continued to love me, and I mean decades. Cheryl continued to love me through my trials. And frankly, my screw-ups, most of which were self-inflicted. But I had Cheryl. Cheryl was my tribe. When I graduated from high school, I had no clear goal. I thought I'd stay in Orange County and get a job. My love was musical theater, and I was performing and doing backup work, but I really wanted to continue in entertainment. But I had no encouragement at home, no agent, no idea how to continue, and still lived church standards, which I had now come to expect from myself. And I knew Cheryl expected it too. And I didn't want to disappoint my tribe. My parents expected me to go to university, but communication between us on that was so minimal, there was no real clear message. Long story short, I had the opportunity to attend BYU, was unclear about what I wanted. What would I study? What was I interested in? I had no plans because I had very little self-esteem and very low self-confidence. I had no sense of purpose. I had no mission statement, internal or otherwise. Well, Cheryl had been such a positive role model for me, I thought I would just take her same path. So I registered as a student in BYU's College of Social Sciences, majoring in sociology, minoring in psychology, just like Cheryl. I realized about halfway through my university career that I needed to be myself and not Cheryl. So I added another minor, followed my academic heart, which I was slowly discovering, and was on my way to figuring out who I was. And I was still attending church. Because my tribe was Cheryl. Cheryl is a living example of someone with a solid sense of purpose who lives her mission statement, and in doing so, influenced my life so that I could go out and hopefully make that same difference, which I believe I have done and continue to do. I encourage you all to be a Cheryl, to find and serve and lift others with positive talk and a patient, loving example. Bob and Cheryl and I have been friends now for 57 years. Oh, I'm sure I'm not that old. We've been friends for a long time. We've stayed in touch all this time, and Cheryl continues to be a positive example in many lives. And I'd like to introduce you to Cheryl and Bob. Stand up. Bob will grouse at me a little bit later for that, but it's okay. E.E. Cummings wrote, "To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best, night and day, to make you everybody else, means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting." Connecting back to that Harvard Business Review article, From Purpose to Impact, and to our college mission statement, to be thoughtful leaders who make communities and families in which we live more just, equitable, and happy, I'd like to conclude by sharing some thoughts from that article. The first step toward uncovering, I'm really sorry, I'm such a dud with this thing. The first step toward uncovering your leadership purpose is to mine your life story for major themes that reveal your lifelong passions and values. For example, what are two of your most challenging life experiences? How have they shaped you? That goes back to resilience. And next, craft. Oh, you guys, you broke it down for me. Oh, great, thanks. Maybe, oh. Okay, well, I'm just going to leave it there then. Next, craft a concise purpose statement that leaves you emboldened and energized. Finally, develop a purpose to impact plan. Purpose to impact plan, by the way, uses language that's unique to you, and it focuses on future big picture aspirations and then works backwards, chunking it into smaller goals, like maybe a year of this and a year of this and a year of this. And also, it will emphasize your strengths, and it encourages a holistic view on family and work. It recognizes that you have a life outside of work. Finding your leadership purpose is not easy, as E.E. Cummings suggested. We're constantly bombarded by powerful messages from those around us and close to us about what we should be. But when you have a clear sense of who you are, everything else follows naturally. Your leadership purpose and your mission statement paint a clear portrait of who you are and what you value. Be true to it and to yourself. And for goodness sake, let's forgive ourselves if and when we fall short of our goals in life. God doesn't expect us to be perfect right now, but He does expect us to make an effort to be a little bit better today than we were yesterday. So, figure out your passion, put your passion to work. Purpose is the key to exceptional performance. Purpose is the pathway to greater well-being. Discover your purpose. Write down your purpose. Live your purpose. Your leadership purpose, combined with your personal mission statement, will serve as your anchor and will help you still hold steady on stormy seas. And thank you so much for inviting me here today to speak to you and to see all these wonderful changes in the campus and in the college. I really appreciate that. Do you have any questions?